and Commission for Citizen Involvement meeting. I'd like to now call the meeting to order. Iris, would you please call the roll?
Beckett?
Here.
Fisher? He has not yet arrived. Heap?
Here.
Leak?
Hello.
Okay, Mr. Fisher is here. Commissioner Leak, I don't see her yet. Okay.
I didn't get an email or anything with a link.
It came last Friday,
Oh,
or
okay.
I think. Commissioner Semler is excused. Pape?
Here.
Philip Stewart?
Here.
There you are. And Erik Olson is with us, and Evan Boone.
Did we get Commissioner Beckett? I'm not sure. I don't.
Yep, I'm here.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So we have quorum. Thanks. First on our agenda is a council update. I don't believe we have a council update tonight, so I'll skip over that. Next on our agenda is item number 4. This is a citizen comment. These are regarding issues not on the agenda. Iris, was there anybody that wished to make a citizen comment tonight?
I have received no requests.
All right. If anyone would like to make a citizen comment, then please email Iris on with the address on our agenda. Next was item number 5, the Commission for Citizen Involvement General Updates. I didn't have any updates for tonight. Commissioners, are there any updates that any commissioner would like to bring? None? Right. And we'll continue to move on. Next is item number 6 on our agenda, the minutes from February 8th, 2021. Commissioners, are there any changes, clarifications, comments for the February 8th, 2021 Plan Commission minutes?
Make a motion to accept the minutes as.
There's a motion to approve the minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
Sorry, second. Commissioner Beckett seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? None. Any abstains? None. The minutes are approved. Then we'll move.
Just showed up.
Sorry, Commissioner Beckett. Yeah, Commissioner Leak, welcome. So we'll move on to our normal business, our other business, item number 7 on the agenda. This is House Bills 2001 and 2003. Public comments are accepted. 5 minutes per individual applies. Iris, was there anyone that wished to make a public comment tonight?
No, there was not.
Okay. The Planning Commission will discuss House Bill 2001 topics for future informational presentations. The staff coordinator is Erik Olson, Senior Planner. Planner Olson, would you like to give us an introduction to some of the proposed topics you had outlined in the staff agenda?
I'd be happy to. Thank you, Chair Heap.
Thank you.
And good evening, commissioners. For the most part, I think we would, I'm hoping to just focus on the discussion and sort of opening up ideas and hearing from the Planning Commission tonight. But I did go ahead and just kind of put together a staff memo with a few ideas of different types of informational presentations that we could host at the Planning Commission and sort of utilize some of the dates that haven't been scheduled yet for some of these informational meetings. So some of those ideas included real estate development, sort of learning more about the opportunities and constraints associated with the development of middle housing as a specific housing type, and hearing from developers with experience building that type of housing to learn a little bit more about what that process looks like and what it's been like in other cities. So, I think the idea would be, somebody like the Home Builders Association could maybe provide a little bit of perspective on that. Other ideas we had were thinking about the feasibility, at least exploring that a little bit more in terms of market feasibility of different types of middle housing. And, perhaps inviting somebody with an expertise with economic analysis specific to housing markets to discuss that topic further. We also think it's very important to at some point discuss infrastructure and infrastructure planning with the city's engineering department. Certainly, we put the idea out there of having a city staff coming in to present about sensitive lands and other protections for resources covered under Oregon's statewide planning goals. Other ideas that we had would be to talk a little bit about master planned communities and how House Bill 2001 applies to master planned communities specifically, about what the permit fees and costs were. We specifically heard from the Planning Commission, I think the last session, that there would be some interest in knowing a little bit more about what those costs are currently and what they could look like for middle housing types and different types of development. And the other thing that we thought might be interesting to explore further would be what conversions of existing structures to middle housing could look like, and kind of, considering the potential for that to occur within Lake Oswego from the perspective of somebody with more expertise specific to those types of conversions. So a home builder, or maybe somebody else like an architect that's worked on projects of that nature that would be able to provide some insight. So those are just some ideas that Scott and I sort of thought would be good to put out there for just to kind of get the discussion going. But obviously we'd be more than open to any other ideas that result from today's discussion. So this is really just intended to sort of get that discussion going. So I guess with that, I'll hand it back over.
Sure. Commissioners, you heard Senior Planner Olson give kind of an outline of some of the areas that he think would be very helpful for the commission to understand, how it may play in the implementation specific to Lake Oswego for House Bills 2001 and 2003. Commissioners, any comments you'd like to give or questions you'd like to ask staff?
I think they're all excellent ideas. Good job.
Thank you, Commissioner Lee. Commissioner Becker, it looks like maybe you have a comment.
I didn't say anything, but I'd like to. I'd like to
Sure.
make a motion that the Planning Commission exclude from the new rules the Mountain Park area. The reason being that Mountain Park was the first large planned community in the entire country. It was very well done, and it, right from the start, provided for more dense housing than most suburbs had. So we should allow Mountain Park to stand alone as it is. So that's my motion, to exempt Mountain Park from the new rules.
Interesting.
Commissioner Beckett has asked for a motion. Point of order, I don't think this was part of the agenda that we had as far as specifically excluding any areas. It was more to look at possible categories of areas that we want to look deeper into. Commissioners, are there any commissioners that would like to second? I would recommend maybe we hold off on this motion until we get closer to the implementation and subsequent meetings. Vice Chair Pepe.
I guess point of clarification, does the Planning Commission have the ability to perform or execute on a motion similar to what Commissioner Beckett has proposed? And
Sorry, Vice Chair Pepe, it looks like your video is frozen. I don't know for anybody else. It looks like the other commissioners I can actually see activity, but Vice Chair Pepe, I believe, is frozen. Oh, now you're back.
Thinking really hard.
Sorry, you're back.
oh, sorry, I guess my internet connection is unstable.
It's back now.
I guess I'm trying to understand, one, do we have the ability to execute on a motion that Commissioner Beckett has brought forth? And two, is that even allowed under the House bill? Can we cordon off areas where we wouldn't allow this to happen? Eric, do you have?
Yeah, I can speak on the second point. I think maybe the first part is more procedural, so maybe Evan can speak to that. But in terms of, you know, the cities, or at least the minimum requirements under House Bill 2001, they would not allow us to exclude any areas within the city that are zoned for single-family residences.
And on the procedural item, of course, today's discussion is to seek feedback and direction on future opportunities to learn more about the topics relevant to middle housing, right? So I think it's in a study session, it's premature, I think, to form the parameters of the regulations. So I would suggest holding that motion, that discussion, until we actually, you know, talk about some regulatory provisions, and then we can talk about whether certain areas should be excluded. So,
Thank you.
It should be a major consideration for us as our recommendation. We don't set the rules, city council would, but we can certainly make recommendations to the city council.
I agree, Commissioner Beckett. I think it's a good point, but we're not there yet, as Evan was kind of pointing out. We're not to the point where we're really making recommendations yet. So I would ask that we hold off. And I did not see any other commissioners give a second to the motion. So as a point of order, I'd say this is kind of outside of our agenda tonight, and the motion will not carry. But we will take your input, Commissioner Beckett, and when we come back to that, where we have the meeting where we're studying what our suggested recommendations are for this, we'll come back to it and reconsider it. But for tonight, that motion doesn't carry.
That's fine, but now we have that food for thought.
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner Beckett. Commissioners, any other comments? Commissioner Leek?
Eric, are there other states who have already implemented this sort of system?
There are not. Oregon is a pioneer when it comes to this.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is a lot of firsts when it comes to statewide implementation, but there are numerous cities that have implemented middle housing regulations.
Cities in that we could perhaps have their planning people talk to us via a Zoom meeting, just to give us an overview of how they implemented it or how it's working.
I don't see why that wouldn't be possible. I'll certainly write that down. It seems like,
Thank you.
you know, I think we would have to maybe target a particular city that we think would be good to hear from, or you know, maybe somebody has a connection that they think would be good to speak with at another city. But we can certainly explore that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Fisher, you had
Yeah,
a comment?
I wanted to second what Commissioner Leek said, which is that these are really interesting topics. My only fear is time. I'd love to hear all of those topics, but if we did one a month or even two a month, we're looking at 4 or 5 months here. So do we prioritize, or can we do them all? I'd love to do them all. I think they're really interesting.
I think that would be very valuable feedback, Commissioner Fisher, would be prioritization. So I don't know if you have, or the other commissioners have, any comments with what they would consider for priority items out of the outline, but I think that would be very helpful for staff.
I think the challenge is scheduling. If there's and not to put the burden on staff, but if there is a possibility where we could do like a you know, just kind of quick hits on all these, and you know, that's not to diminish their importance, of course, but say you did 30 minutes on 4 different topics in a meeting. I mean, we could hit half of them potentially in one meeting, but of course that gets to scheduling and being able to pull that off. But you know, I would like, just real quick, you know, these are all, I think, extremely relevant topics for Lake Oswego, and you know, and you know, I agree with Commissioner Beckett on the observation about master plan communities, you know, in Lake Oswego, we've got a number of them. So I think that's a really important topic as well, which, you know, I'm sure we'll be talking a lot about down the road.
Vice Chair Pepe, sorry, you wanted to make a comment. Sorry for the delay.
Oh, that's fine. I agree with what Commissioner Stewart just said. As far as topics, if we can have more than one per session, I think it would be valuable and hopefully doable. But for the topics that Senior Planner Olson put forward, I would recommend bullet points 1, 2, 3, and 7 and 8. But all of them are, as others have said, are valuable. And so if we can get someone to come in and talk about the other bullet points, the more information, the better, especially as we're getting down to the wire to making recommendations.
The easiest one to coordinate and plan for is the cost of Lake Oswego's permitting process for something like middle housing. So we could squeeze that in anytime. And I personally think it would be good to hear from somebody from the HBA who, since no one really deals in quote middle housing yet, but getting their perspective on it, because they're the ones who are going to be doing it.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Lee. Commissioners, other comments?
Yes, I'd like to bring up another big topic
Sure.
that I've talked about before, but we have a lot of waterfront property here that is quite valuable. And those waterfront properties should be excluded from having to be subdivided a lot. The properties are lakefront, the main canal, Blue Heron Canal, along the Willamette River, the Tualatin River, and next is some parks.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Beckett. So some areas you've touched on with respect to the areas you're mentioning, it seems like that seems to align with the sensitive lands and other goal protected resources. So I think what we're hearing is that's definitely an area we'd like to better understand and understand how, you know, what type of implementation options do we have to take into account sensitive lands and goal protected resources. And then also, to your other point with the mountain park, you know, the master plan communities, learn more about how House Bill 2001 applies to master plan communities. I think we could study that and get more information on that too. So I think both the sensitive lands and the master plan communities are ones that, you know, we're hearing a request for more information, more understanding on. I agree with Commissioner Leek's input that, you know, more of, you know, the real estate development, somebody like the Home Builders Association, getting more input or more information from some of the development groups on, you know, strategies, options that Lake Oswego may have in implementing House Bill 2001. That's another good one. And then I was going to mention the other one. Again, I know we're kind of saying all of these are very good. This is what's coming up. But the parking for middle housing, I think Commissioner Beckett, you've also mentioned that a number of times that you'd like to better understand how parking plays into this. I think the comments were, you know, Lake Oswego has several or a large number of narrow streets. And so, you know, what type of flexibility do we have with parking to try to implement House Bill 2001? So that'd be another area that would be interesting.
Right.
We can meet twice a week.
An observation, if I may, Chair.
Sure.
You know, there are certain topics that might be able to be covered, you know, multiple topics by one presenter, perhaps. So,
yeah.
Or, you know, maybe some topics that would lend themselves to being sort of included in a session with others that are, you know, similar or related.
Yeah.
So, you know, we could try to be strategic in how we schedule these things and you know, if somebody came in to perhaps discuss market feasibility of middle housing, you know, they might be able to talk a little bit more about parking as well. And, you know, the same with the, you know, city engineering department could probably be able to cover parking in addition to other infrastructure planning types of notes.
All right. Thank you, Senior Planner Olson. One other question was that I think, you know, part of the feedback that we're getting for the meeting tonight from the commissioners was that just understanding the sequence of how do we move forward and getting closer to, you know, adapting House Bill 2001 specifically for Lake Oswego. So is there any way you could kind of summarize the next steps? You know, would we have time? I think the request, the feedback that was getting was, you know, would we have time to take in this information? And then as we got the neighborhood survey results back, be able to, you know, look at it, look at some of the suggestions we've got from these various groups that are giving inputs on how does it address or not address, you know, some of the feedback that we get from the neighborhood associations or the neighborhood surveys. And then, you know, the next step would then be looking at specifically creating the code. And so I think part of the questions that the commission has is, you know, they're wanting to jump directly to, you know, can we get in, as we heard tonight, can we get into, you know, start forming recommendations for how House Bill 2001 would look for Lake Oswego? Can we start discussing some of the specific issues? But it may be helpful just to kind of give an outline of, you know, where we're at, and then, you know, where do we get to that point where we're actually ready then to start debating and, you know, coming up, forming the recommendations for how do we implement the middle housing specifically for Lake Oswego and adapt it to Lake Oswego. Planner Olson, is that something that you can kind of give us an outline for kind of what are the sequence of the next steps, and then how do we get to where the commission is really wanting to go, which is start discussing specifics on how do we implement House Bill 2001 for Lake Oswego?
Yeah, so, you know, I think, you know, the way that you, you know, sort of outline that just in how you just
Sure.
there, I could try to work with that. Sure. But, you know, I think that it would make sense maybe to cover a little bit more of the, I guess, larger, more umbrella type topics.
Okay.
On. And then as we, you know, move forward to specific discussion of code, you know, it might make sense to drill in on, for instance, master plan communities, sensitive lands regulations that exist in the city, and, you know, what are the details that, you know, we think could be affected by HB 2001. You know, I think those conversations will be a little more specific and very much contingent on what will be allowed under the state minimum requirements, and there will be a lot more detail, I think, as opposed to, you know, other topics that would be a little bit more, you know, something like economics of middle housing, where it would be, you know, a little bit more of a topic that, you know, it's not going to really get into the code writing necessarily details for us, but it would be good for us to consider maybe earlier on when we think about, you know, moving forward and in a more detailed way. It might just be better to explore that earlier in the process.
Okay.
So yeah, I guess that's what I would think. You know, maybe the more detailed topics later in the sequence.
But those are really dependent upon. Are we waiting mostly for the neighborhood surveys to come back, or is it more that we're waiting for, you know, the state to finalize some of the, you know, minimal code type of modifications? Maybe what are the dependencies that we have? Is it on the surveys, the neighborhood surveys, or is it more on some of the state work that's being done and the definitions that the state's doing?
So at this point, we have everything, you know, more or less from the state in terms of the minimum requirements. So our process right now is really, you know, we're taking the recommendations from those neighborhood surveys, you know, the results of them really, in addition to a lot of other information, working with our consultant Cascadia partners to put together the neighborhood character report, which is, you know, a lot of sort of neighborhood profiles that we've been able to gather from the you know, neighborhood character interviews and survey, that we've sort of tried to take those results and refine them on a neighborhood basis. And it's it'll be a fairly large document. So that's kind of what's being developed right now. And I think the next, the next steps in terms of moving forward with HB 2001 will come in May. So May 18th, we have, I think we have a confirmation actually at this point that it will be a joint meeting with City Council and the Planning Commission, where we'll give a bit of a preview of what will be in that neighborhood character report. And at the, I think we'll have the bulk of the document will already be available, but in terms of what we'll discuss with City Council, it will be a bit of a preview of what will be discussed the following week in more detail by Jamin, really going through the results of that with the Planning Commission at a work session and giving a more detailed presentation about what, not only what's in the neighborhood character report, but the other deliverables that they have been able to create for us. So we have a series of 5 different deliverables that we've talked about with Cascadia, and we have at least made a lot of progress on the first 2, and there's a few more that they're still working on that they will also be discussing. So just a review of those 5 deliverables. There's a neighborhood conditions analysis, so that's kind of an existing conditions report on the neighborhood, sort of a quantitative analysis. There's the neighborhood character report, which is really more of a qualitative analysis that's really using a lot of the results of the neighborhood character survey and interviews, as well as a lot of sort of in-depth exploration of neighborhood character and architectural characteristics. And so there will also be a code audit and a comprehensive plan audit. And all of this will sort of be culminated in the final deliverable, which would be the recommendations, essentially, the opportunities report that will be provided by Jamin at Cascadia, and will give a sense of the different paths that the city could take that would address sort of the results of the neighborhood character report and the other deliverables that they've been working on. So ultimately, we'll start hearing those results in May, and at that point, we'll start wanting to talk more about the process that we'll use to engage folks. So I think thinking a little bit more about the process at that point, as opposed to this sort of initial background information gathering phase.
Okay. Commissioner Stewart.
In Cascadia Partners work, is there anything that they're going to coordinate with regards to any sort of market feasibility studies or similar?
They aren't going to be including anything specific. There are a lot of reports that were produced throughout the rulemaking process, so there are a lot of publicly accessible reports that had been developed for that purpose, but that's not something that Cascadia is scoped to do at this point.
Because one thing that's really interesting to me as I've been thinking about this over the last few months is I think it's going to be important to have for the commission to have an understanding of what land costs in Lake Oswego. And if you're a developer and you come in and you buy a piece of land, and what does that cost if it's got a house on it? And then what does it cost if that house is demolished and middle housing is built? And then what is it ultimately going to have to sell for in order for the developer or the owner to make a profit? And I think that's going to tell us a lot about, how feasible middle housing in Lake Oswego actually is. And, based on the value of land, the cost of land, the cost of housing, we may be surprised at what we find. That's just a comment.
Chair Heap, I think you're muted.
Sorry, I was talking on mute there. I was going to say those are good comments, Commissioner Stewart. I think that is in line with the bullet item that we had for market feasibility. Just understand about the market specifics of Lake Oswego, and then how what are our opportunities or lack of opportunities to build in middle housing given the market that Lake Oswego has. So I think those are some good comments. Also going back to Senior Planner Olson's comments, it sounds like then we kind of have the right course ahead of us. I think looking at the topic areas, it looks like the list was somewhat formed based on input that we've got in previous Plan Commission meetings, the previous input commissioners have asked for. So I think it's very well aligned. And then as Senior Planner Olson was outlining, it seems like we got a little bit of time to take in and study kind of these different categories of related to middle housing. And then in May, we'll kind of we're at the point where we get some previews of the neighborhood surveys. And then we start maybe after that going into some specifics of, looking at how do we, tailor the minimal code to fit within the kind of the guidelines, the feedback that we've received for Lake Oswego. So I think it's some good discussion. I think this has been helpful. Hopefully it's, gave a little bit of clarity to the commissioners on kind of the process we're taking and also the, alignment of the information that we'd like to gather as we move forward towards, meeting with council and also getting the feedback from the consultants. So commissioners, any other comments?
Yes, I have one.
Sure, Commissioner Beckett.
Is a task that the staff, Erik and his staff, could help with. We have a lot of streets in Lake Oswego that are very narrow. And if middle housing is developed in a way that forces parking onto the streets, that's not going to be practical. So it would be good to have an inventory of those streets where, and what the way HB 2001 is written, it requires the city, if there's constrained infrastructure, and that's the term, constrained infrastructure, then the city is allowed to put it on a slow track, but required eventually to widen that infrastructure and provide for it. That's not only very expensive, but in many cases, it's totally impractical.
So Commissioner Beckett, a question for you then is, out of the areas, now you're specifically talking about the category for parking for middle housing. Is that something that you would prioritize high on the list as compared to the other ones? You mentioned.
Yes.
So all right. And the other input that you've given is, I think, is as far as lands that are on waterfront, it seems like that aligns a little bit with the sensitive lands and gold projected resources. It seems like your input there is pretty high on that one too. So I haven't, as we look at the list, like I said, it looks like, staff has really captured a lot of the input that we've made as far as request goes for more information. So I don't see any particular category that we say, we'd like to take off. The only thing that may be new that I didn't hear a lot from tonight was the conversions of existing structures to middle housing. I think that may have been briefly mentioned in some of our previous meetings, but it's not something that maybe is getting as strong feedback as the other ones we're discussing. So, that could be maybe a little bit down towards the bottom of our list, but something that we'd still like to cover if possible. Commissioner Stewart?
So just to clarify, I'm assuming that refers to converting a single family house into a duplex. I mean, I can't imagine it would go much beyond that, right?
It would be possible to convert into any of the middle housing types that would be allowed in that particular zone under the bill. So, while it might not be feasible for some homes, there are some larger single family homes where, it might be possible to divide them into a quadplex or triplex. But yes, that would be something that would be permitted, that the city would need to rather permit in order to be compliant with the bill.
Okay, thanks.
And I guess just one other clarification that I would offer is that the type of feedback that we're getting at this phase is really about the physical characteristics of neighborhoods from the community. So we're getting a lot of input about the characteristics that folks value within their neighborhoods. And there will be many other opportunities to hear more specific opinions from citizens about implementation and specifics of that implementation. So I just kind of want to just, you know, when we're thinking through the process of what, you know, how this will unfold, you know, there will be, you know, perhaps opportunities to discuss this, you know, after May even, you know, there wouldn't need to be necessarily decisions about implementation made at that point yet.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair Pepe.
Yeah, going off of what Commissioner Stewart was just mentioning, and then what Senior Planner Olson was clarifying, I think that the conversion of existing structures is going to be a big topic and a big concern of neighborhoods to make sure that whatever structure, if it is a larger home on a good amount of acreage or land that is torn down, and or a smaller home on smaller land, how is whatever is rebuilt consistent with the characteristic of that neighborhood? So I would say that one should be probably a little bit higher on the list. Again, they're all very good topics, and I would leave it to Senior Planner Olson and staff to schedule out on how best to find somebody to bring the information to us. But I'd be careful as to saying that might not be something that's too high on the list of those living in the city.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair Pepe. Only comments I have on that is I thought this category we had conversion of existing structures to middle housing. That would be like what Commissioner Stewart was mentioning, you know, something like a single family home that's getting converted to middle housing, where maybe tear downs would not be covered so much in that category. That may be more on the market feasibility. But I was taking this specific category to be, you know, how do you take an existing structure and convert it to middle housing? That wouldn't include tearing down, but keeping the existing structure and then converting it. Is it similar to what staff's thoughts were, Senior Planner Olson?
Yeah, that's what we were thinking with that particular bullet point.
Right. And I think your point's well taken, Vice Chair Pepe, that there may be some. So I guess it's very hard to, you know, maybe put these in a priority order. I think, you know, it's a great list. It's definitely things that have resonated within the commission's discussion so far. So ideally, you know, we agree with staff. I mean, we'd really like to, you know, hear and discuss more on each one of these categories. So it's just a matter of, you know, schedule and can we fit it in, as we were discussing earlier. So we'd like to proceed. Commissioner Leek. Sorry, Commissioner Leek, you're on mute.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
I actually think in the short run, the conversion of existing structures to a duplex or a fourplex would happen before a lot of things get torn down and redeveloped, because it's easier to do. You have an existing structure already in place. So I wouldn't put that on too low a priority as far as addressing how that should be regulated or overseen, or what metrics they have to meet to do it.
Thank you, Commissioner Lee. Commissioners, any other comments, suggestions for staff? Otherwise, I think what we heard tonight, Planner Olson, is that staff has a very good list. We'd like to proceed in discussions. You know, I think it was very helpful that you're kind of outlining the process again for what are the next steps. You know, when do we actually start, you know, looking at the details of implementing the code? It's a bit ways out, but in the meantime, the categories that staff has outlined there is very good. So we definitely like to proceed on getting more information on those, and very helpful. Any other comments that staff or that commissioners would like to make? Otherwise, Eric, do you have anything else that you would like to cover tonight, or I think we might be able to conclude here just to say it's a good list.
Yeah, the only thing I would mention is that, when we have Cascadia come in to discuss some of the results and recommendations and sort of these initial deliverables that they're presenting, that might be a good opportunity to ask them something along the lines of, maybe just in the follow-up, kind of what Commissioner Leek had suggested earlier. They aren't staff from other cities that have been working on this per se, but they've worked with staff in other cities and might be able to offer some perspective on that. But yeah, just another sort of idea of how we might be able to hear that perspective, at least in the shorter term.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, we'll try to leverage maybe the experience they have with other communities. It's a good suggestion. I see no other commissioner comments, so I think I would like to just conclude here then. So thank you, Eric and staff, for the good presentation. We look forward to looking at all the categories that was in the staff outline. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair Heap. Thank you, commissioners.
Yeah. Commissioner Leek, did you have another comment or question? No. All right, thank you. So now we'd like to move on the agenda. The next item on the agenda, let me get back to it here, was a schedule review. Director Siegel is out, so I don't know if we had anything on schedule review. Eric, did Director Siegel confer with you on anything we'd like to discuss for schedule?
Yeah, he asked me just to give a brief overview of some of the schedule updates.
Okay.
I won't go into too much depth, but he wanted me to mention that we still don't have anything confirmed for the 22nd with Ken Sandblast from the Lake Grove Business Association, and there had been a tentative, something on the books tentatively for the 22nd for that discussion related to the West Lake Grove or Lake Grove Village Center overlay amendments. So we're still hoping to confirm that, but haven't been able to do so yet. When it comes to the flood hazard overlay, that's another situation where we haven't received confirmation, but tentatively planning for a work session on April 26th with Paul Espy. And that should be the next date for that. But again, that's subject to confirmation and change. And when it comes to House Bill 2001, obviously there's a lot of details that we're discussing tonight that have yet to be finalized. But we have at least a confirmation of that joint Planning Commission and City Council work session on May 18th. So that's on the books, and we will have a work session the following Monday with Jamin at Cascadia Partners talking about the results of their work for us during the last few months. So that will be the next confirmed dates for House Bill 2001, and we will work to schedule other presentations in the interim.
All right, thank you. One question, as we outlined all the different categories, do you think if we're not able to finalize the discussion with Ken Sandblast and the Lake Grove Village Association, do you think any of those categories that we outlined tonight, we might be able to have some discussion on those for March 22nd, or do you think that might be too early?
There might be an opportunity to talk about the permit fees from city staff. We had been tentatively discussing the April 26th date as, there might be also a work session for a flood hazard overlay, but we were hoping to set that aside for the city engineering department for Erica Rooney to come in and tell us a little bit about infrastructure in relation to House Bill 2001. So that's, we had, been trying to at least find a date that worked for her, and that sounds like it would work best. But yeah, I think when it comes to other city staff, though, we might be able to figure something out for the 22nd. So I'll be in touch and we can try to coordinate on that.
Okay, it'd be great if we could touch on any of those categories that you outlined tonight. I know it might be a little bit early, but some of the things like, even discussion with the Home Builders Association, that would be great. So we'll just have to see what happens with Ken and the Lake Grove Village Association. And then, if there's an opportunity to, touch on any of those categories we talked about tonight, I mean, that'd be fantastic. I think the commission would very much look forward to that.
Great. Yeah, I think, it's just a matter of scheduling and availability. So, we'll try to get something. I guess we'll try to hear from Ken first, and then
Sure.
His availability, move forward from there.
Right. Commissioners, any questions or comments on the schedule? None. Then thank you, Erik, for the presentation tonight, and then for the schedule update to you and Director Siegel and staff. Thank you. And if there's nothing else, then I'd like to adjourn the meeting. Thanks, everyone.
Night, everybody.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks, staff.
Night.
Night, everybody.
Bye.